My name is Michael Hansen. I'm an assistant professor of political science at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. I won the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership 2020-2021 Faculty Research Grant. I created this video to talk about my project and the results for my project, opening the door to backroom politics, local government digital transparency and privacy in Wisconsin. Before talking about the results of my project, I'd like to talk about the goals. The first goal I had is I wanted to explain variance in local government digital transparency. This would include items such as budgets, meeting minutes, government structure, info on elected officials, anything that's kind of within the norms of governmental daily policy. The second goal is to explain variance in digital access to local government public policy. In this respect, I wanted to extend the analysis past previous studies which only look at transparency items above. In particular, I wanted to explore policies that citizens are most likely to need access to and whether they're available on these websites. For example, when looking solely at local governments, I wanted to know whether information exists on things such as marriage license information, land deeds, registering to vote, basically any of the policies that you would interact with at each level of government. In terms of school districts, I wanted to look at items such as, is there information on how to enroll your child in the school district? Is there information on accessing special needs education? Is there information on busing, school lunch programs, curriculum, etc.? Kind of a range of about 15 items. The third goal, and probably the more important goal in terms of my role as an educator, would be to mentor undergraduate participation in research. The University of Wisconsin-Parkside is a smaller commuter university with a focus on teaching courses. Therefore, the opportunities for students to engage in research with professors are fairly limited in scope. But while I've been an active participant in winning the Undergraduate Research Apprenticeship Award 4 times, these opportunities only allow me to mentor one student at a time, and they don't provide for summer compensation, and the compensation overall is quite low for the student. The only other option for helping develop research skills through the collaboration on research with undergraduate students involves independent study credits. The issue with these credits are that students must pay out of pocket for those credits. In the past, when students have participated in independent study but have paid for these credits, it's kind of led students to feel not really part of a collaborative team and kind of downplay their contributions and achievements. By receiving this grant, I was able to lead and mentor a research team of 5 students that received recognition for their work through substantial financial support. So as this project started along, as the students were collecting data on Wisconsin websites, the COVID-19 pandemic arose. This forced rather quickly the university to go fully online. So I no longer had access to the students in a setting within a classroom or within an office. However, we viewed this unfortunate pandemic as an opportunity to study government information in a different way. So we pivoted the research project to better understand dissemination of information of COVID-19 on local government websites. What resulted is the study resulted in a peer-reviewed journal article in the Canadian Journal of Political Science. In the field of political science, the Canadian Journal of Political Science was really the first journal to make COVID-19 front and center in terms of publishing. They had a fast track for peer-reviewed research, and we were able to get this in their special series on COVID-19. The 3 undergraduate research assistants that worked on the project are co-authors, as well as a graduate student. So this opportunity allowed me to fulfill Goal 3, which was mentorship of students. Through this experience, the students learned about conducting scientific research and academic peer review process. The project also led to us gaining very valuable insights into government dissemination of safety information on COVID-19, which was the entire point of the study, was to understand how governments disseminate information. This particular article, which is titled The Partisan Impact on Local Government Dissemination of COVID-19 Information, Assessing U.S. County Government Websites, has already been cited by 2 medical journals in the last year, and it seems like we were filling a gap in terms of understanding how this information was disseminated. The unit of analysis for this study was all U.S. official county government websites. The investigation then is if there's a correlation between the overall partisanship of a county and whether county government's website, 1, mentions COVID-19, and 2, provides safety instructions concerning COVID-19, how to stay safe, washing hands, these types of things. The hypothesis that we had was that mass partisanship will impact the probability that a county government's website provides information related to the coronavirus. What we noticed about the pandemic relatively early on is the pandemic became a partisan issue. Therefore, we expect it to impact how county governments react to this type of event. The finding is that a larger share of Democratic voters in a county is associated with an increase in the probability that a county government's website mentions COVID-19 and provides safety instructions for its residents. What's notable about our study is that the results hold even after controlling for population density, internet subscriptions, and COVID-19 cases and deaths. The implication then from our study is that citizens' access to information, even on matters of public health, are partially a consequence of partisanship. This kind of raises a gloomy prospect for United States government and our ability to respond to crises. Here I have a map from the publication that shows county government websites across the U.S. and whether or not they provide safety precautions. So as you can see, it is predominantly these Republican-controlled areas where there was less likely to be information on these websites. This figure shows predicted probabilities of the relationship between Hillary Clinton's county-level vote share and the probability of a county government mentioning COVID-19 on their website and providing safety precautions. As you see, going from the lowest Clinton vote share in 2016 to the highest, we see an increase of about 40% in the probability of mentioning COVID-19 on the county government website. Likewise, when going from the lowest Clinton vote share to the highest Clinton vote share, we see about a 35% increase in the probability that a county government provides safety precautions for COVID-19. After the COVID-19 information study, I pivoted back to solely exploring local government, school district, and law enforcement websites in Wisconsin. The result of the creation of these data sets and these analyses was a peer-reviewed journal article publication in Policing and International Journal, which is a pretty prominent criminal justice journal. For this publication, an undergraduate research assistant that assisted with the coding of law enforcement websites and a colleague from Sam Houston State University, which is well-versed in criminal justice, are included as co-authors as they helped with the data analysis and with the writing of the paper. The design methodology approach here was a content analysis of all 179 county and municipal local law enforcement agency websites within Wisconsin. After this, we then implemented a comparative analysis that explored whether the quantity and quality of information available on law enforcement websites was similar to those of local governments and school districts. So we wanted to know basically if we find a lack of transparency on law enforcement agency websites, is this in line with other similar governmental entities? The findings are that law enforcement websites contain a noticeable lack of information. The finding is even more important when comparing law enforcement websites to the websites of local governments and school districts. In addition, we also find a positive link between information sharing on law enforcement websites and the proportion of the civilian staff at an agency that are women. In particular, we find the more women that are employed at the law enforcement agency, the more likely there will be information available. This finding aligns with other research that shows that an increase of representation of women in governmental entities leads to an increase in information transparency. Here we have a table from the article that was published. And this is police website descriptive statistics. I really have to say that there's quite an appalling lack of information available on law enforcement agency websites in Wisconsin. So if we look at, for example, the budget, only around 6% of all law enforcement websites post their budget. A little over a quarter of them post their annual report. Around 32% provide a previous annual report. A little less than 8% provide an organizational chart. An organizational chart is necessary to have if you are a citizen who wants to file a complaint against an officer to know who the supervisors are. And finally, quite astonishingly, only around 6% of websites contain any information at all on how to file a criminal complaint. In terms of other particularities, we see similar lack of transparency and lack of dissemination of information. Around 65% provide absolutely no crime statistics for the area that they are in charge of enforcing the law in. 62% contain no information on how to file an officer complaint. Previous studies have shown that it is pretty difficult to file an officer complaint because law enforcement agencies intentionally do not provide this information to citizens. In terms of the aspects of a law enforcement agency that you'd be most likely to interact with, in terms of tickets and accident and police reports, we find a lack of information there also. So around 42% contain no information on paying parking tickets. Around 50% contain no information on paying other fines or tickets beyond parking tickets. 23% do not provide any information on filing an accident report. Similarly, a quarter do not provide any information on filing a police report. And finally, 50% provide no information at all on how to submit an anonymous tip to a police department. The anonymous tip finding is quite concerning because previous research has shown that the use of anonymous tips can really help police departments solve crimes when there are no other leads. Here we have table 3 from the peer-reviewed article, Local Government Website Descriptive Statistics. And if you look at these tables, you'll see that information is quite abundant on other governmental entities in Wisconsin. So if we look at county governments, we can see almost 80% provide a budget. For all of the other information, 95% or more. For example, having a meeting agenda, 97% provide the meeting agenda, meeting minutes, 94%. If we look at things like health information on county government websites, 98% provide health information. Same finding with city governments, basically. 75% provide information on waste information, 78% provide information on water information, 78% provide information for building inspections. If we look at village governments, we even see there that there's quite a lot of information provided in comparison to these police department websites. So again, budget through previous meeting minutes, we see an overwhelming majority of them provide that information, but even something like tax information, 64% provide that information there. Voting information, around 80%. We see school districts, a lot of the information that we would want to access was there. 85% provide information on obtaining school lunches or reduced lunches. 75% provide information on enrolling your child in special needs education or the special needs curriculum information. So we really see that law enforcement agencies are unique in that they are not providing this information to citizens that is crucial. In terms of the research that has already been conducted, I want to talk about some of the research challenges that we faced with this project. In terms of the interviews, the COVID-19 pandemic rendered it impossible to conduct interviews with elected officials. When we reached out to elected officials, especially at the start of the pandemic, they were very reluctant to have an interview over the phone or over Zoom or in other formats such as these. The second challenge was undergraduate oversight. It took a bit of time to find balance between allowing students to conduct research at their own pace and setting hard deadlines. This was kind of a trial and error process, and it was successful in the end, but there were some roadblocks for sure along the way. The third kind of actual major challenge is administrative help, basically. So UW-Parkside lacks important resources to support faculty on really large research projects. So we have no grants coordinator currently. It was very difficult obtaining budget information because there's this layer of bureaucracy between the researcher and the budget, and the researcher doesn't always have access to this information immediately. There were also issues with hiring research assistants in a timely manner. At times, because of the bureaucratic, apparatus, a research assistant would be identified. They would fill out the forms for employment, and then it would take 2 to 3 months to get those things processed. Again, this is due to the fact that UW-Parkside does not have a lot of research assistants, so it's not a common occurrence. And then finally, there were issues getting approval to conduct aspects of the research, which impacted the project quite a lot. So one aspect of the study that I wanted to implement was using money to conduct a survey on citizens' ideas of transparency on government websites in Wisconsin. However, again, because Parkside lacks the apparatus to deal with a project this big, it took forever to get approval to use, the platforms to conduct these studies, to the point where it was too late. So it took about 3 months to even get approval to use a survey platform. Beyond the challenges, what are the next steps for this study? The next step in the project is to explore the relationship between school boards, elected membership, and access to information on school board websites. We already have the data, as I showed before. We collected information on all of the school board members, and we want to look at how do demographics of school board members impact the information that's available. In particular, I want to explore the relationship between women's representation on elected boards and the availability of information. The hypothesis that I have is that a higher proportion of elected members of school boards that are women will be associated with a greater increase of the availability of information on school district websites. This particular project is currently in the data analysis stage. The results do demonstrate a strong relationship. As there's more women school board members, there's greater access to information such as special needs education, reduced school lunch programs, and these types of things. Now it's about putting everything together and finalizing the research study and writing everything up. I thank you for listening to my talk on my project and hope that everyone is safe in COVID times.